The night was eerily silent as Mike Tyson drove down a nearly abandoned highway on the outskirts of Los Angeles. The hum of his engine was the only sound breaking through the darkness. He had just left an intense training session, sweat still clinging to his skin, his mind heavy with thoughts of discipline, survival, and the battles he had faced both in and out of the ring. He wanted nothing more than to enjoy the quiet drive home, letting the cool night air clear his mind. Then, he saw it. A rundown 1998 Ford Taurus was stranded on the shoulder of the road, its hazard lights blinking weakly like a desperate SOS signal. Beside it stood a woman clutching a small child to her chest, her silhouette tense, exuding distress. Even from a distance, Mike could feel the weight of their struggle. He instinctively tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He could have kept driving. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't a hero. The world had already demanded too much of him. But something about their hunched figures under the flickering streetlight stopped him cold. Slowing down, he pulled over, rolling his window down just enough to speak. "Everything okay here?" His voice, deep and steady, cut through the thick tension in the air. The woman hesitated before stepping forward, her face pale with exhaustion. "Our car. It broke down," she stammered. "I just need to get my daughter to safety before it's too late." Mike saw the desperation in her eyes and knew he couldn't walk away. The woman's voice wavered, and Mike Tyson could hear the weight of exhaustion in it. She was holding it together, but just barely. The little girl beside her clung to her mother's coat, her tiny hands gripping the worn fabric as if it was the only thing keeping her safe. The child couldn't have been older than 6 or 7, her dark, tired eyes reflecting both fear and silent resilience. Mike felt something stir deep inside him. He had seen that look before, the look of someone who had been fighting for too long, too hard, with nothing left to give. It was the same look he had seen in the mirror as a kid growing up in Brownsville, when survival meant more than just throwing punches in a ring. He exhaled, then stepped out of his car. The woman instinctively pulled her daughter closer, her body stiffening in a protective stance. Mike slowed his movements, keeping his voice calm. "I'm Mike. What's your name?" She hesitated, eyes darting between him and the road, as if expecting danger from every direction. "Lisa," she finally said, "and this is Ava." Mike nodded and crouched slightly, meeting Ava's wide eyes. "Hey there, Ava. You okay?" Ava barely whispered, "Cold," before burying her face into her mother's side. Mike didn't hesitate. He turned, popped his trunk, and pulled out his gym bag, rifling through it until he found a hoodie. It wasn't much, but it would be warmer than what the little girl had. He draped it gently over Ava's small shoulders. Lisa's lips trembled. "You don't have to do this." Mike met her eyes. "Yeah, I do." He moved toward the front of the car and lifted the hood. The engine let off a faint, acrid smoke, confirming what he already suspected. It was completely shot. Lisa stood behind him, shifting nervously from foot to foot. "It's done," Mike said flatly. "This thing isn't going anywhere tonight." Lisa sucked in a breath, fighting back emotion. I just needed to make it to the shelter downtown before they closed for the night." Mike clenched his jaw. He had been in fights with champions, but something about this moment, the helplessness in her voice, the way Ava shivered under his hoodie, felt like the hardest blow he'd ever taken. "You got anyone you can call?" he asked. Lisa shook her head. "Phone's dead. Last few bucks went into gas." That hit him hard. Mike had been there, hungry, desperate, fighting the world just to survive. And now, staring at this mother who had given everything just to keep her daughter safe, he knew there was only one answer. "All right," he said, standing up straight. "You're not staying out here." Lisa blinked. "What?" "I'll get you both somewhere safe tonight. We'll figure the rest out tomorrow." Lisa's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. She wasn't used to kindness. Mike knew that feeling too well. Just then, the distant sound of an engine roared through the night. Headlights appeared in the rearview mirror, growing closer, too fast. Mike's instincts flared. He turned sharply, stepping in front of Lisa and Ava. The car screeched to a stop a few feet away. 3 men sat inside, their faces obscured by shadows and the dim glow of their cigarette embers. The driver leaned out. "Yo," he called, his voice thick with trouble. "Everything all right over here?" Lisa shrank back. Ava whimpered softly. Mike squared his shoulders. He recognized this game. Predators smelled weakness, and Lisa and Ava looked like prey. I got it handled, Mike said coolly. The driver smirked, looking Lisa up and down. Yeah? Looks like the lady could use some real help. His buddies chuckled. Mike's blood simmered. He knew their type. Guys who got off on making people feel small. Bullies in the worst way. He took a slow step forward, his presence alone enough to make most men reconsider their choices. I said, he repeated, his voice dangerously calm. I got it handled. A beat of silence. Then, the driver's smirk faded. His eyes flickered with recognition. Shit! That's Mike Tyson. The man in the passenger seat swallowed hard. The Mike Tyson? Mike took another step. The confidence drained from their faces. He could see the calculation happening in real time, the realization that they had just picked the worst possible person to mess with. The driver cleared his throat. Aye, man, no disrespect. We were just checking in. Then check out. Mike's voice was low, lethal. No hesitation this time. The car peeled out, tires screeching against the pavement. Lisa let out a breath she didn't even know she had been holding. Oh my God. Mike turned back to her and Ava. He knelt, placing a reassuring hand on Ava's shoulder. You're safe now, he told her. Lisa stared at him, emotions warring in her eyes. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Mike stood looking down the dark, empty road where the car had disappeared. He exhaled deeply. Because I know what it's like to have no one stop for you. To be continued. What do you think happens next? Does Mike take Lisa and Ava to safety? Or is there more danger lurking in the night? Comment Tyson if you think he's about to do something incredible. If you're loving this story, smash that like button and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Mike Tyson stood still for a moment, his fists unconsciously clenching as he watched the taillights of the car disappear into the night. His pulse was steady, but the fire inside him burned hotter than ever. He had seen too many people in his life get left behind, too many stories like Lisa and Ava's, where survival wasn't about strength but about luck, and who was willing to help. Tonight, he was the one who stopped. He turned to Lisa, who still looked shaken, her arms wrapped protectively around Ava. Come on, he said, his voice steady but firm. You're not spending another second out here. Lisa hesitated, glancing at Ava, then back at Mike. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he replied. Just get in the car. Lisa swallowed hard, then nodded. She gently lifted Ava, who was still clutching the oversized hoodie Mike had given her, and slid into the passenger seat. Mike closed the door behind them and walked around to the driver's side. The moment he sat down and started the engine, Lisa exhaled, the tension in her body easing just slightly. As he pulled back onto the road, the silence in the car was thick, almost suffocating. Ava's small fingers played with the fabric of the hoodie, while Lisa stared blankly out the window, her mind still trying to process the last few minutes. Mike finally broke the silence. Where were you headed? Lisa blinked, her voice still shaky. A shelter downtown, but I don't think they'll have space this late. Mike thought for a second. He could take them there, let them fend for themselves like so many others did. Or he could do what no one ever did for him when he was a kid, give them a fighting chance. You're not going to a shelter, he said. You need a real place to stay. Lisa turned to him, confusion in her eyes. Mike, I can't. You can, he interrupted. And you will. Lisa's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to tell him that she didn't deserve this, that it was too much, but she couldn't find the words. Mike picked up his phone and dialed a number. After a few rings, a deep voice answered. Yo, Tyson, what's up? I need a favor, man, Mike said, keeping his eyes on the road. I need a hotel room, tonight, no questions. A pause, then, done. I'll text you the address. Appreciate it. Mike ended the call and glanced at Lisa. You and Ava are going to sleep somewhere safe tonight. In the morning, we'll figure out what's next. Lisa shook her head, still overwhelmed. Mike, why are you doing this? Mike's hands tightened around the wheel. Because I've been you before. Lisa didn't know what to say. She stared at him, searching his face, trying to understand why a man like him, one of the most famous fighters in the world, would stop for someone like her. Mike didn't offer any more explanation. He didn't need to. The drive to the hotel was silent, except for Ava's soft breathing. When they pulled up to the entrance, Lisa's eyes widened. It wasn't just a cheap motel. It was a real hotel, a place where people with money stayed. I can't afford this, she whispered. I didn't ask you to. Mike got out of the car, walked around to her side, and opened the door. Lisa stepped out cautiously, still in disbelief. Inside, the receptionist already had everything prepared. Mr. Tyson, she greeted respectfully. Everything is set. Room 214. Mike nodded. He took a key card and handed it to Lisa. Go get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow. Lisa hesitated, her eyes brimming with emotion. I don't even know how to thank you. Mike gave her a look. You don't have to. For the first time in a long time, Lisa felt something she hadn't in years. Hope. She took Ava's hand and led her toward the elevator. As the doors closed, she met Mike's gaze one last time, silently promising that this moment wouldn't be wasted. Mike watched them disappear, then let out a long breath. This wasn't over. Not even close. Tomorrow, he was going to change their lives forever. The next morning, Mike Tyson sat in a quiet corner of a hotel cafe, his fingers lightly drumming on the table. He had been up for hours, thinking. The fight wasn't over just because Lisa and Ava had a place to sleep for the night. This wasn't about a quick fix. He wanted to change their lives. As he sipped his coffee, he glanced toward the elevator. The doors slid open, and there they were. Lisa looked exhausted but lighter, as if the weight on her shoulders had slightly eased. Ava, wrapped in the oversized hoodie he had given her, rubbed her sleepy eyes as she clung to her mother's hand. Mike stood and waved them over. Morning, he greeted, pulling out a chair for Lisa. Morning, she said softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I don't even know where to start. Start with breakfast, Mike said simply, handing Ava a menu. Then we talk. Lisa hesitated before nodding. It had been a long time since someone told her to take a moment just for herself. She helped Ava pick out something to eat while Mike watched, his mind already racing ahead. Once their food arrived, Mike leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. Lisa, tell me what happened. Start from the beginning. She swallowed, glancing at Ava, who was focused on her pancakes. Then, with a deep breath, she started. I had a job, she said. I worked as a receptionist at a law firm. It wasn't great, but it paid the bills. Then one day, they downsized. I was let go with barely any warning. Mike listened intently, nodding for her to continue. At first, I thought I'd find another job quickly, but I had no family to help with Ava, and childcare costs were too much. Every interview I went to, they'd ask how flexible I could be. I didn't have an answer. Her hands tightened around her coffee cup. I sold everything I could. We moved into a cheaper apartment. But then rent went up, and I fell behind. The eviction notice came, and suddenly we had nowhere to go. Mike's jaw clenched. He had seen people struggle before, but something about hearing it from Lisa, watching the quiet pain in her eyes, made it personal. I tried, she whispered. I really did. But no one hires a homeless woman with a kid. Ava looked up at her mother then, her voice small but certain. You're the best mom ever. Lisa's breath hitched. She quickly wiped at her eyes. Mike exhaled. Lisa, you've been fighting with everything you have, but now it's time for someone to fight for you. Lisa blinked at him, confused. What do you mean? I mean, I'm not just going to leave you here and wish you luck, Mike said, his voice unwavering. You and Ava need stability, a foundation. So, I'm getting you one. Lisa's mouth opened, then closed. Mike, it's not up for debate, he cut in. You need a place to stay long term. I've already got something set up. Lisa stared at him in disbelief. What? I made some calls, Mike said. There's an apartment. Fully paid for the first few months. That gives you time to get back on your feet. Lisa shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. I can't accept this. It's too much. It's not too much, Mike said firmly. You've already done the hardest part, surviving. Now it's time to start living. Lisa covered her mouth with her hands, overwhelmed. And that's not all, Mike continued. I got you a job. Lisa's breath hitched. A job? Yeah, at a gym I own, he said. It's not fancy, but it's real work, with real pay. You'll be trained. You'll have flexible hours so you can be there for Ava. Lisa's lips trembled. Why would you do this for me? Mike looked at Ava, who was staring up at him, her big eyes full of trust. Then, he looked back at Lisa. Because I've been you before, he said. And someone once gave me a shot. Now it's my turn to do the same. Lisa let out a shaky breath, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. For the first time in years, she felt something other than fear. She felt hope. Lisa sat frozen, the weight of Mike Tyson's words pressing against her chest. An apartment, a job, a chance to start over. It didn't seem real. I don't know what to say, she whispered, her fingers trembling around her coffee cup. You don't have to say anything, Mike said. Just take the chance. Tears welled in Lisa's eyes, but before she could respond, Ava suddenly perked up. Mama, does this mean we won't have to sleep in the car anymore? Lisa's breath hitched. She turned to her daughter, her vision blurred with emotion. Yeah, baby, it means that. Mike watched as Lisa wiped her tears, trying to compose herself. He had seen fighters break down after grueling matches, but this was different. This wasn't about strength in the ring. It was about survival. And Lisa had survived long enough. It was time for her to win. Later that afternoon, Mike drove Lisa and Ava to their new apartment. It was nothing extravagant, just a modest, two-bedroom space in a quiet neighborhood. But to Lisa, it was everything. She stood frozen in the doorway, taking it all in. The clean walls, the simple but comfortable furniture, the warmth of a place that finally felt safe. Ava ran inside, giggling as she explored. My own room, she squealed, jumping onto the bed. Lisa covered her mouth, emotion overwhelming her. Mike, I don't even... Yeah, Mike said, leaning against the doorway. It's yours now. You and Ava don't have to look over your shoulder anymore. Lisa turned to him, tears streaming down her face. How do I ever repay you for this? Mike's expression was steady. By making the most of it. Lisa nodded, unable to speak, but what neither of them realized was that this moment was only the beginning. Word of Mike's act of kindness spread quickly. A neighbor had seen him carrying bags into the apartment, and within hours, the story had made its way across the community. By the next day, local news had picked it up. Mike Tyson helps struggling single mother get back on her feet, the headlines read. But it didn't stop there. Inspired by Mike's actions, people began stepping up in their own ways. A local grocery store donated a month's worth of food to Lisa. A nearby daycare offered Ava a scholarship so she could attend for free. Even strangers started sending messages of encouragement, proving that one act of kindness could start a movement. Mike didn't seek the attention. He had done what felt right. But as he watched Lisa and Ava settle into their new life, he knew one thing for certain. Sometimes a single decision to help did more than change a life. It changed everything. Lisa never thought she'd wake up in a real bed again, one that wasn't in the back seat of her car, one that didn't come with the fear of being told to leave. But that morning, as the sun poured through the curtains of her own apartment, she realized something. For the first time in years, she wasn't waking up in survival mode. She turned her head to see Ava still fast asleep, curled up under the warm blankets. The soft rise and fall of her daughter's breathing brought tears to Lisa's eyes. This was what safety felt like. She sat up, pressing her hands against the mattress, as if grounding herself in this new reality. It wasn't a dream. Mike Tyson had changed everything. Later that morning, Lisa arrived at the gym Mike had set her up with. She was nervous. It had been a long time since she'd stepped into a workplace without the crushing weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. The gym was alive, the rhythmic sound of punching bags being struck, the clanking of weights, the scent of sweat and hard work filling the air. It felt raw, real, like the kind of place where people fought for something bigger than themselves. A tall man with salt and pepper hair approached her, extending a hand. You must be Lisa. I'm Tony, the manager. Mike told me about you. Lisa swallowed hard, shaking his hand. He did? Tony chuckled. Yeah, said you were a fighter. I like that. Lisa's brows knitted together. I've never fought a day in my life. Tony raised an eyebrow. Haven't you? Lisa blinked. That's when it hit her. She had fought every single day. She had fought against hunger, against eviction, against the gut-wrenching pain of watching her daughter wonder where they would sleep next. She had fought for survival. She was a fighter. All right, Tony said, motioning toward the front desk. Let's get you started. We'll train you on managing memberships, scheduling, and running the place. And who knows, maybe one day we'll get you in the ring. Lisa let out a small, breathy laugh. One step at a time. She meant it. This was the first step. Meanwhile, the story of Mike Tyson's act of kindness continued to spread. Social media was on fire. Mike Tyson isn't just a legend in the ring, he's a legend in life. Helping a single mother and her daughter like this? Unbelievable. This is why I love Tyson. He's been at rock bottom before, and now he's out here changing lives. Respect. But it wasn't just admiration, it was action. Inspired by Mike, local businesses started paying it forward. Restaurants offered free meals to struggling parents. A small auto shop in the area started fixing up cars for single mothers at no charge. What Mike had done wasn't just about Lisa anymore. It was about everyone. But what happens next? Will Lisa be able to hold on to this new life? Or will her past struggles come back to haunt her? If you want to see what happens next, comment, fighter below, and don't forget, hit that like button if you believe in second chances. The story is far from over. Stay tuned for part 7. The days that followed were unlike anything Lisa had ever experienced. For the first time in years, she wasn't waking up dreading what the day would bring. She had a job, a roof over her head, and most importantly, hope. At the gym, she threw herself into her work, eager to prove herself. She learned quickly, mastering the front desk duties, scheduling sessions, and handling clients with ease. But what surprised her the most was how much she began to love the energy of the place. She watched as fighters trained, their focus razor sharp, their movements precise. There was something about the way they carried themselves, their discipline, their determination, that struck a chord in her. One evening after closing up, she found herself lingering near the ring, watching 2 fighters spar. Tony, the gym manager, noticed and walked up beside her. "You keep staring at that ring like it's calling your name," he said with a smirk. Lisa laughed lightly, shaking her head. "I don't know the first thing about fighting." Tony shrugged. "Didn't stop you from surviving." Lisa turned to him, his words settling deep inside her. He wasn't wrong. She had been fighting, just in a different way. "You want to learn?" Tony asked casually. Lisa hesitated. I don't know." Tony studied her for a moment, then gestured to a pair of gloves resting nearby. "Put these on." Lisa stared at them. Could she really do this? After a beat, she reached forward, slipping her hands into the gloves. Tony led her to a heavy bag and positioned her feet. "First rule, fighting ain't just about power. It's about control. Aim with purpose, not anger." Lisa nodded, then took a deep breath. She raised her fists and threw her first punch. It was awkward, off balance. "Again," Tony said. She adjusted, throwing another, then another. Each time her movements became steadier, stronger. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just enduring, she was fighting back. Meanwhile, Ava was adjusting to her new life as well. Her new school was different from what she was used to. There were no whispers about where she slept at night, no judgmental glances from teachers who knew she was homeless. Instead, there were friends. One afternoon, Lisa picked her up and found her chatting excitedly with a group of kids near the swings. When she saw her mom, Ava ran up, beaming. "I made a friend," she announced proudly. "Her name's Sophie, and she invited me to her birthday party this weekend." Lisa's heart swelled. This was exactly what she had wanted for Ava. A chance to be a kid, to feel normal. As they walked home, Ava chattered on about school, her words filled with excitement. Lisa listened, savoring every second. She had fought for this, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she was winning. Weeks passed, and for the first time in years, Lisa no longer felt like she was just barely holding on. She was standing tall, taking control of her life, and most importantly, building a future for Ava. Her job at the gym had become more than just a paycheck. It was a place where she felt valued, where she learned about strength, both physically and mentally. She started training after hours, working the heavy bag, learning footwork, feeling powerful for the first time. It was late one evening when Mike Tyson stopped by. He had been busy with his own work, but he never forgot about Lisa. He walked into the gym and spotted her at the heavy bag, her fists flying in a steady rhythm. Her movements were controlled, her stance solid. She had learned. Mike smirked. Didn't take you long to start throwing punches. Lisa turned, startled, but when she saw who it was, a smile broke across her face. You think I'd work at a gym and not pick something up? She teased, breathless from training. Mike walked closer, watching her. You look different, he said after a moment. Lisa wiped sweat from her brow. Different how? He tilted his head, like someone who ain't scared anymore. Lisa paused, letting those words sink in. She glanced at her hands, hands that had once only been used to shield herself from the world, now learning to fight back. She exhaled deeply. I think, for the first time, I actually believe I can do this. Mike crossed his arms, nodding. Good, because I didn't help you just so you could survive. I helped you so you could win. Lisa met his gaze, understanding exactly what he meant. As Lisa continued to build herself up, she felt a growing need to give back. She couldn't forget what it had been like, being invisible, being helpless. One day, as she walked through the city, she passed by a small shelter. A mother and her child sat outside, their eyes hollow with the same exhaustion she had once felt. Lisa stopped. She took a deep breath, then turned and walked toward them. Hey, she said gently, kneeling down. Do you need help? The woman looked up, startled. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Lisa smiled softly. I do. She reached into her bag, pulled out the extra money she had earned from working overtime, and placed it in the woman's hand. Come with me, she said. Let's figure this out together. That day, Lisa realized something. She had been saved by one act of kindness, and now she would pay it forward.